I, William, Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, as your liege man of life and limb. So help me God.
King Charles had braced himself for another difficult message from his youngest son. But what he wasn't prepared to see was Prince William's title appearing beneath an order William hadn't signed. Just minutes before, it had been a routine security alert at Windsor. Prince Harry was standing outside a restricted entrance, requesting entry to a private strategic meeting taking place inside the castle. But when the security officer delivered the authorization document to Charles's desk, the room fell silent. The document stated Harry was acting on behalf of the Prince of Wales. There was no signature from William, no instructions from the heir's office, no digital confirmation. And most worryingly, William had absolutely no idea his younger brother was heading to Windsor. Charles reread the last line so slowly that those around him almost held their breath. Then the king's hand tightened around the edge of the paper. Who gave her permission to use my son's name? The answer came quickly. No one. If you don't want to miss the most intense confrontations behind the royal gates, subscribe now and turn on notifications for the next stories. Outside the gates, Harry still refused to leave. He said his family couldn't keep ostracizing him forever. He believed William's position should open a path back, not become the final wall separating him from his family. But inside Windsor, Charles no longer saw a son pleading to be heard. He saw the power of the heir being used without permission. The king ordered the gates closed, and just then William entered the room. He picked up the document, read the first few lines, then suddenly stopped. The language in it was not unfamiliar. William had seen these words before. William said nothing immediately. He held the document in his hand for a few more seconds, his eyes slowly scanning each line as if to confirm he hadn't misread it. The already quiet room grew even heavier. No one dared speak as the direct heir to the throne intently gazed at the words bearing his own title. Then William paused. It wasn't the signature, neither was it the presentation. It was the language. There were phrases he had personally written months before. They appeared almost identically in the document before Charles. Only one thing was different. The words originally written for a private conversation between the two brothers now appeared as an official order from the Prince of Wales's office. William closed his eyes for a moment. He understood immediately what had happened. A private promise had been transformed into institutional power. A family conversation had been cloaked in the guise of royal power. Charles immediately noticed the change in his eldest son's expression. He didn't need William to explain. That look alone was enough to show this was no longer a simple misunderstanding. The king turned to the officials standing in the room. Check everything. The order was brief but decisive. Immediately, the entire internal verification system was activated. The source of the document had to be verified. Old correspondence had to be reopened. Document samples previously stored in the system had to be compared. Deactivated office accounts had to be checked. And most importantly, it had to be determined who Harry had been in contact with in recent days. Not a single detail could be overlooked. Meanwhile, outside the meeting area, Harry was escorted from the main gate to a guarded reception room. There was no more arguing with security, no more requests to enter the meeting, only a prolonged silence. When an officer asked why he had brought the documents, Harry calmly replied that he hadn't stolen William's authority. According to Harry, months earlier, William had promised him a chance for a private conversation. He was simply trying to find a way to reopen a door that had once been opened. That explanation was quickly relayed into the meeting room. Charles requested all the messages and files related to their previous meeting. Each line was carefully compared. The result caused everyone in the room to pause. It was true that William had suggested a private meeting. It was true that he had said the two brothers should speak in silence. But all of it came with very clear conditions. There wasn't a single line allowing Harry to go to Windsor on his own. There was no wording granting him the right to use the title of Prince of Wales. and even less so any promise that could be interpreted as formal approval from the heir. Charles carried the documents into the next room, where William still stood alone by the window. The king closed the door behind him and asked his son in a much slower tone than before, "Is there any part of what Harry said that you can accept?" William remained silent for a long time. He looked out at Windsor Castle, where Harry was still being held below, before turning back to face his father. "I did request a conversation," William replied, "but that was a conversation between two brothers. Not permission, not an order, and certainly not the right to use the title of Prince of Wales." William gently placed the documents on the table. His voice was no longer as angry as it had been initially, but every word was so clear that no one in the room could interpret it differently. Harry may have been invited to speak with his brother, but he was never allowed to speak on behalf of the heir. William's emphatic statement brought the room to a standstill. Charles didn't ask any further questions. He understood that to understand why Harry believed he had the right to appear at Windsor with such a document, he had to go back in time to their private meeting a few months earlier. It was there that a door had been opened, and it was there that a clear line had been drawn. At that time, Charles had been the one to initiate the meeting. He realized that the distance between his two sons was no longer just a family conflict. The long-standing disagreements had begun to cast a shadow over royal affairs, fueling media speculation and prompting public questioning of the institution's unity. Charles hoped that if William and Harry could have a private conversation free from pressure from the press or advisors, things would at least have a chance to change. William agreed, but he set very clear conditions from the outset. There would be no cameras. There were no recording devices, no announcement from the palace, no royal staff present, and most importantly, everything said in that room would never be used as evidence for any formal request later. William came to the meeting as an older brother, not as the Prince of Wales. The first few minutes were quieter than Charles had expected. The two brothers talked about family, about the years gone by, and about the growing distance between them. William listened more than he spoke. He tried to explain that the door to family communication was never completely closed, as long as both respected privacy and didn't turn those conversations into public pressure. Harry listened in silence. But then he changed the subject. According to Harry, a conversation alone wasn't enough. He wanted more. Harry hoped William would help him regain access to his family, secure a role in the future, and reconsider the decisions of the royal staff that had prevented his return. In Harry's mind, if William truly wanted reconciliation, his older brother was in a position to pave the way. William shook his head. He said slowly that the affection between the two brothers could not become official power. There were things he could do as a relative, but there were limits even the heir to the throne could not cross. Royal procedures did not exist to punish Harry, but to protect the stability of the institution. That explanation did not satisfy Harry. He looked directly at William and said that his brother held everything he had lost: his position, his protection, his decision-making power, and the ability to determine who could enter the royal palace. Harry suspected William was hiding behind rules and procedures to refuse a younger brother who simply wanted to return to his family. The atmosphere in the room instantly changed. William wasn't angry. He calmly replied that if rules were broken because of personal feelings, then one day the power of the royal family would be used as a tool in private conflicts. At that point, not only would the family be hurt, but faith in the institution would also be shaken. The meeting ended without a handshake. Before Harry left, William called his brother back one last time. His voice wasn't loud, but each word was clear. "You can always speak to me as a brother, but you must never use my name, my title, or the power of the Prince of Wales to gain entry into the royal family." That was his final warning. Months later, when William appeared at Windsor gates holding the document, He was shocked to realize that the very words from a private conversation between the two brothers had been copied almost verbatim to create a document that looked like an official order. William kept his eyes on the references at the end of the document, but Charles closed the file. He understood that the whole truth couldn't be uncovered from the documents on the table alone. The first thing to do was to hear Harry's explanation. A few minutes later, the conference room door opened. Harry entered under the watchful eyes of security. He had already handed over his phone's smartwatch and all communication devices as per procedure. He had also been clearly informed that this meeting did not signify the restoration of royal duties, the reopening of access to Windsor, and certainly not a negotiation about his future status. Harry simply nodded. He walked into the room without looking at anyone. Charles stood behind the large table. William remained by the window overlooking Windsor. Between father and son lay the controversial document neatly placed on the table, like evidence in a hearing rather than a family gathering. No one spoke first. Finally, Charles broke the heavy silence. He pushed the document toward Harry. "Do you know that William's title was used in this document?" Harry looked down for a few seconds. Then he answered calmly, "I know." No denial, no attempt to shirk responsibility. Harry went on to explain that months ago, William had opened a door for them to talk privately. In his mind, that door had never truly closed. He was just trying to walk down the path William had agreed to open. As soon as the answer was given, Charles suddenly slammed his hand down on the wooden surface. The sound echoed, silencing the entire room. "No." His voice was low but filled with anger. "An invitation from a brother can never become an order from the air." Charles looked directly at Harry. "You've confused family affection with royal power." William finally looked away from the window. He walked slowly to the table and looked at his younger brother. The initial outburst of anger was gone. Instead, there was a disappointment that was hard to conceal. William said that what hurt him most wasn't just his name appearing on the document. What hurt him more was that Harry had taken the very moment when he had been most soft-hearted and turned it into something resembling official permission. He explained that if this document were accepted, the consequences wouldn't stop at just a meeting. Security personnel would no longer know which was the real order. Fake instructions could be carried out before verification. Those working in the palace would lose the only standard by which to determine who truly represented the heir. And the prestige of the Prince of Wales' office would be damaged by a single false precedent. Harry listened intently. Only when William paused did he speak. If compassion doesn't accompany action, then it's just another way of saying no. Harry said he had tried waiting, tried remaining silent, tried sending messages through various channels, but all ended in closed doors. According to Harry, in the end, he didn't know what to do to get his father and brother to sit down and talk to him. Charles fell silent. In that moment, he no longer saw a man merely trying to bypass security. He saw his youngest son desperately searching for a way home. But even as his father's heart began to waver, the responsibility of a monarch compelled him to continue. Charles asked directly, "Who helped you create this document?" Harry hesitated. After a long silence, he admitted that there was an intermediary who was very familiar with the workings of royal correspondence. This person understood the formatting the language of the Prince of Wales's office and had helped recreate the document's form to make it look like a legitimate directive. Charles immediately demanded the person's name. Harry shook his head. He said it was the last person who still believed they deserved a chance to return, and he didn't want to ruin that person. No one answered. Just as the silence fell, William bent down to take one last look at the end of the document. His gaze settled on a tiny string of references. Just a few seemingly meaningless characters. But William recognized them immediately. The string of references led to an old office account. An account that should have been deactivated years ago. William immediately pulled the document towards himself. He no longer paid attention to the main content. What caught his eye now was the small series of symbols at the bottom corner of the page. To an outsider, they were just meaningless technical characters. But to someone who had run the Prince of Wales office for many years, William recognized them instantly. They were the reference code for an old relay system, a system that should have been deactivated years ago. William looked up at Charles. Without needing to speak, both understood that the conversation had just entered a completely different phase. This was no longer simply a dispute between two brothers. This had become a matter concerning the security of the entire institution. Charles immediately instructed his senior private secretary to bring all the technical files to the meeting room. Just a few minutes later, the security screen was turned on. Each of the old accounts of the Prince of Wales office began to be reviewed. After nearly an hour of examination, the first results appeared. The reference string in the document did indeed belong to a forwarding account that had been used during the period when William was restructuring his office. That account no longer had authorization. It was no longer authorized to issue directives. It was no longer used in any official activities. However, what surprised everyone was that the system had never been completely disabled. Many old correspondence templates were still stored inside. Many administrative formats. Many presentation styles that the Prince of Wales office had used years before. Most importantly, an administrative contractor who had worked on the system still had access to that data. Charles requested the full communication history be opened. He sat beside his senior private secretary, intently watching every line of information displayed on the screen. The atmosphere in the room was almost frozen. Then a date appeared. 3 days before Harry's arrival at Windsor. William saw that date first. Immediately afterward, the private secretary opened the communication log. The results silenced the entire room. The former administrative contractor had contacted Harry's intermediary exactly 3 days before the event. The exchange didn't mention the break-in at Windsor. Neither did it mention the plan to meet Charles. But the entire conversation revolved around how to craft a document convincing enough for security personnel. They discussed how to present it exactly like the Prince of Wales's office. They analyzed which title would elicit the quickest response from staff. They compared the sentence patterns William had used in internal correspondence. They even discussed leveraging the brothers' private promise to make the document more credible. What chilled Charles was the final assessment in the transcript. If the document matched well enough, the staff might act before the verification process was complete. Charles silently removed his glasses. He leaned back in his chair for a long time. For the first time since the crisis began, he wasn't thinking much about Harry. He was thinking about himself. For years, still hoping his youngest son would return. Someday, Charles had maintained some unofficial channels of communication. He had never wanted to cut off all avenues completely. He believed that a small door should always be left open for family. But now those very doors had become a loophole. A father's soft heart had inadvertently created a weakness in the entire system. Charles picked up his pen. There was no more hesitation. He immediately signed the first urgent directive. All inactive accounts had to be deactivated immediately. All old correspondence had to be locked. All unofficial channels of communication relating to Harry had to cease. From that moment on, any request using the name of the Prince of Wales had to be confirmed directly by the digital system from William's current office. Most importantly, no old letter, no verbal promise, and no family conversation would be considered grounds for access to the royal family. Harry sat silently listening to each decision being read aloud. He understood perfectly what had just happened. Not just one account closed. Not just one procedure changed. But the last secret passage that had connected him to Charles had also officially disappeared. After a moment, Harry looked up at his father. His voice was much softer than when he entered the room. "I only need 10 minutes. 10 minutes alone with your father." Charles looked at his son for a long time. In his eyes, there was a conflict between the feelings of a father and the responsibility of a king. Finally, he slowly shook his head. "No, until you tell me who that intermediary is." Charles stared at Harry for a long time. His answer remained unchanged. The room fell silent again. For the first time since arriving at Windsor, Harry didn't try to argue. He understood that all explanations had been given. All formal doors had closed before him. Harry slowly reached into his coat pocket. He took out a carefully folded envelope. No seal, no letterhead. Just a piece of paper folded many times, as if it had been picked up and put down countless times. Harry held the letter out to Charles. "Father, may I read it?" His voice was so low it was almost a plea. Charles looked at the envelope but didn't take it. After a few seconds of silence, he gently shook his head. "If it's a document addressed to me, it has to follow proper procedure." Harry paused. He said nothing more. Perhaps that very moment made him realize that the line between father and king had never been clearer. Even a letter couldn't bypass the regulations Charles had just signed. Harry took a deep breath. Finally, he slowly read out the name of the intermediary for the secretary to record in the official document. That's what Charles had requested from the beginning, and it's what Harry had kept secret until the very end. When the record was complete, the security guard opened the door. Harry stood up. He turned to look at William as if waiting for a call to return. But William remained still. He didn't move. He didn't say goodbye. Harry silently left the room. The door closed behind him, ending the hours-long confrontation. By evening, Windsor had returned to its usual quiet. The advisors left one by one. The investigation screens were turned off. The documents related to the investigation were sealed and moved to the archives. Only Charles remained, returning to the room where it all began. The table was still in its original position. The document using William's title had been seized as evidence, but the envelope Harry had left behind was still there. Charles walked slowly towards it. He picked up the envelope. Then he stopped abruptly. Instead of opening it immediately, he asked William to return. A few minutes later, William entered the room. No lawyer, no secretary, no security guard. Just the two of them. Charles placed the envelope down in the middle of the table. He spoke very clearly. "Reading this letter does not change any royal decision. This is just a family matter." William nodded slightly. Charles opened the envelope. The first lines were read very slowly. Harry wrote that he knew he had used William's title without his consent. He knew it was wrong, but he also confessed that he no longer believed a request bearing only the name Harry could reach his father or brother. In his mind, the only door still capable of making people stop and listen was the door bearing William's name. Charles paused mid-sentence. He didn't continue reading. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock. William silently looked down at the table. For the first time since the crisis began, he no longer saw before him someone who was merely deliberately abusing power. He began to see a brother who believed he no longer had any voice in his own family. After a few minutes of silence, William spoke. His voice was much calmer than during the earlier confrontation. "I'm desperate. I understand. But desperation cannot be a reason to use someone else's power." Charles continued reading the final lines of the letter. Harry wrote that what he feared most wasn't losing his status, nor was losing his royal duties. What he feared most was that one day, no matter how many times he knocked, no one in the family would open the door to listen to him. Charles gently folded the letter. He leaned back in his chair for a long time. Then, for the first time that day, he admitted something he had never told anyone before. Perhaps he himself bore some responsibility. For years, Charles had kept private channels of communication, hoping that one day Harry would return. He had never wanted to completely sever the bond between father and son. But it was precisely those secret doors that had led Harry to believe that behind every closed door, there was always another way out. Charles set the envelope down on the table. William looked at his father. They both understood that the letter wasn't asking for the reinstatement of royal duties. Neither was it asking for the return of status or power. What Harry truly wanted was a private meeting. A meeting with just his father, his brother, and himself. No more titles. No more formalities. No more closed doors between a family that had grown so distant. Neither Charles nor William spoke further after the letter was folded. Outside the window, the Windsor sky had begun to turn the pale gray of dawn. A long night had ended, but both understood that the real confrontation was far from over. What happened in this room belonged only to the family. What would happen after sunrise would belong to the entire country. Charles rose carefully, setting Harry's letter aside, then pulled the document bearing the title Prince of Wales toward him. He looked at William. "This letter is a family matter," Charles said slowly. "This document is a matter of the institution." William nodded slightly. That was the boundary they both decided they would never let be blurred. By dawn, after hours of deliberation, Charles and William agreed to completely separate the two issues. On one side was Harry's private plea, a son desperately wanting to be heard. On the other was the unauthorized use of the title Prince of Wales, an act that crossed the boundaries any institution is obligated to protect. These two stories may have come from the same person, but they cannot be resolved by the same judgment. Just before breakfast, the royal office released a short statement. No harsh words, no scathing accusations, just a few lines confirming the events. An unauthorized access request had occurred at Windsor. The title Prince of Wales had been used without the consent of the holder. Prince William did not sign any related documents, and the entire royal security process had been strengthened to prevent a similar incident from happening again. The announcement ended there. No further mention of Harry, but that much information alone was enough to spark a fierce debate across the country. Within hours, images of the Windsor gates appeared on most morning news broadcasts. Television programs relentlessly analyzed every detail. Discussions in the press and on social media were divided into two completely opposing camps. Some saw Harry as a son who had been pushed to the brink. According to them, if all doors were closed, seeking another path was merely the reaction of a desperate person wanting to be heard by his family. But on the opposite side, many argued that no personal pain could justify the unauthorized use of the heir's power. If that precedent were accepted, the line between family affection and royal authority would cease to exist. By mid-morning, a major newspaper appeared on newsstands with a bold headline, "Not under my name." Right below was a picture of the Windsor gates still closed. That headline quickly became the most talked about topic of the day. Soon after, a royal commentator made a remark that further fueled the debate. Harry didn't just knock on William's door. He came with a key bearing William's name. Just a short sentence. But it quickly appeared on television, radio, and across forums. In the eyes of many, that statement encapsulated the entire crisis. However, by the end of the day, different information began to emerge from those familiar with the inner workings of Windsor. Harry wasn't asking for the restoration of his royal role. Neither was he demanding the return of his official duties. All he wanted was a private meeting with his father and brother. That information caused many to pause. Harry's motives suddenly became more understandable, but even the most sympathetic people admitted that the way he chose to achieve his goal had gone too far. While the media continued to debate, Charles refused any suggestions for a stronger statement. Some advisors suggested the royal family should publicly condemn Harry to assert their position. Charles disagreed. He said that defending William's title was imperative, but making his own son the target of public humiliation was a completely different matter. William didn't feel he had just won either. He had defended his title as Prince of Wales. He had defended the principles of the institution. But in return, the gap between the two brothers seemed to widen even further. Charles silently gazed at the final draft decision lying on his desk. He knew that with just one more signature, everything would be officially closed. Harry will not be reinstated, but he also will not allow any document to turn his son into someone erased from the family. Charles signed the final judgment without saying another word. From that moment on, the document used at Windsor was declared completely invalid. The use of the title Prince of Wales without William's approval would never be permitted. Harry was no longer automatically granted access to royal residences, prohibited from representing any member of the royal family on duty, and all unofficial channels of communication were officially closed. But beneath that decision, Charles quietly left a handwritten note specifically for his son. He wrote that Harry would always be his son. If one day Harry accepted responsibility, acknowledged the hurt he had caused William, and never used family affection as a means to regain power, then the door for a private meeting would remain open. William agreed with the decision. He did not object to a future reconciliation, but insisted that family forgiveness would never equate to the restoration of institutional power. Shortly afterward, Harry sent back a signed document admitting he had acted without William's permission and promising not to repeat the mistake. The intermediary was removed from all royal communications. Old accounts were deactivated, and security breaches were finally fixed. Holding the two documents in his hands, a royal ruling and a letter from his father, Harry understood he had never been erased from the family. What he had lost was only the path back to power. The Windsor gates remained closed. William's title was protected. The system remained unchanged. But what Charles retained after all was a father's love for his son. Do you think Charles made a fair decision, or should he have given Harry a chance from the start? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos.